Good evening, members. Prayers this evening will be said by the very Reverend John S. Richardson of All Saints Church. Before the prayers, can we remain standing in silence 1 minute in memory of Mrs. Marion Ring and Mr. Paul Oldham, both former members of the Borough Council and past mayors who sadly passed away last month. Thank you.
We give thanks for the life and the ministry and the work and the vocation of past councillors and mayors, particularly remembering this night Councillor Paul Oldham and Councillor Marion Ring, for their concern and diligence for the peoples of this borough across all generations, for their generosity of time, for their wisdom and their wise counsel, for their friendship, for their understanding. And as we remember their work this night, we show compassion towards their family, their friends, and their colleagues. So we offer our own work as councillors this night for the work and the agenda before us, for the outcomes in terms of what it means for the residents of this borough, and for the wards that we represent, for all the resources that go into public service, for the work and vocation of those who work on our behalf, for their well-being, for their fulfilment and satisfaction in work, and for the benefit of all. God of tenderness and strength, you brought our paths together this night. Go with us as we travel through good, through trouble, and through change. Bless our meeting, our decision-making, our home and our parting, and make us worthy of each other's best and tender with each other's dreams, trusting in your love, in Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please be seated. Thank you. Before we commence proceedings this evening, may I take this opportunity to advise you that if the fire alarm does sound, please remain seated, and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. These proceedings will be webcast and recorded by the Council, but will anyone else be recording or filming them? I simply ask to let people know if this will be happening. Right. Thank you. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies for absence from Councillors Bartlett, Clark, Mortimer, Springett and Kimmins. Are there any other apologies? None. Are there any applications for dispensations? Thank you. Are there any disclosures by members? None? Good. Are there any disclosures by officers?
On this occasion, Mr. Mayor, yes, there are. I disclose an interest on behalf of all Maidstone Borough Council officers in the room concerning item 15, which is the pay policy statement.
Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? None. Is it agreed that the items on the agenda be taken in public as proposed? Are the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the Borough Council held on the 29th of November 2023 agreed as a correct record? Right. I spoke earlier on about Paul Oldham and Marion Ring, and looked to the group leaders or their nominees to pay a tribute. I understand Paul Oldham, Councillor Burton is going to speak on Paul Oldham, and Mrs. Gooch and Janetta Sams and Mo Cleater and Harper are going to speak, and Clive wants, yeah, thank you. Put that down. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I cannot stand before you and say that I knew Paul really well. In fact, I probably only met him properly twice. And I look to the board behind the mayor that records previous mayors and see that it was 1993 when he was mayor. I was at Maidstone Hospital. It was an inaugural meeting of an asthma society or something like that. I was there in a commercial capacity. The mayoral car arrived. Mayoral cars were a little bit more splendid in those days. And out jumped Paul. And he mingled with the group, niceties, but very pleasant. And then he spoke. He understood what they were about. He had empathy with their cause. He concisely summed up the day. He was everything that we would want the mayor to be in supporting the community groups of our borough. And that long ago, that stuck in my head. The second time I really had the pleasure of his company was much more recently. He'd written to me as leader concerning the very generous donation of funds for the museum gallery in memory of his parents. He'd written to me. He did not use technology. He did not use computers. It was only very latterly that he even had a television, but he wrote to me. It was a proper envelope with a stamp and the Queen's head on it. So the mayor at the time, Councillor Mrs. Gooch, she very kindly allowed me the use of the mayor's parlour, and I met with him and we talked through his very generous offer. He was looking for assurance that the offer had been received and was understood, and indeed it was, and the work carries on at pace to honour that contribution. And then for another, well, probably the best part of an hour, he just shared knowledge. Not archaeology was his love, perhaps, but it wasn't the knowledge of the past deep beneath our feet. It was even the more recent past of the recent history of the Archbishop's Palace and what we'd tried and what we hadn't tried and how we'd done this and we'd done that. And he was just a wealth of information, and he shared it in such a lovely way and so willingly. So I'll make my words short, but the conclusion is such a mine of information is lost to this borough. He had made a great contribution, and I simply, on behalf of the Conservative group, reiterate our condolences to his family and friends, and he is, I'm sure, a great loss and sorely missed by this borough.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. I've got several people that wish to speak here, and that's Clive English, Councillor English, Mrs. Gooch, T. Sams, Maureen Cleater, and Councillor Harper. So in that order, can you... Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It is hard to, shall we say, encapsulate such a long and glorious career as Councillor Oldham had in a few words. It's a platitude that's often said when people pass on, that they were one of a kind, that they made a considerable contribution to the borough. A platitude, but in this case, it's more than that. I first met Paul when I was, I think, about 14 years old. Went into a latest sequence of speakers' meetings at Vinters Boys' School, as it was in those days, had arranged. The previous few speakers had been about as boring as possible, so I was anticipating catching up on my sleep. Sadly for my sleep-deprived self, I was completely unable to sleep during the presentation by Paul Oldham, which was on Roman Kent. It's absolutely fascinating, and the sheer amount of knowledge, and not just knowledge, because people can have knowledge and be unable to put it across. Paul had knowledge and the ability to communicate it to the most diverse groups of people, some of whom previously had no interest in the subjects he was talking about. His contribution, not just to Maidstone's political life, not just as mayor, but as in various roles. I think he'd done pretty much every role that was going on the council other than leader of the council. I particularly treasured it when I think it was Councillor Hodson put him in charge of the council's IT programme, which was an interesting approach, but at least Paul could claim that he was completely disinterested, not uninterested, significant difference, and that he came with no preconceptions. I think it's fair to say that he had a very varied political career, but one thing was notable, well, two things were notable. He had very strong principles. In fact, at times, he actually sat outside the Conservative group. It's probably not remembered now, but he briefly sat as a Tory Reform councillor along with Jeremy Hindle, who also contributed quite significantly to Maidstone's political heritage over the years, including getting us Cobtree Golf Course. Paul had principles. When everyone on Kent County Council on a certain side voted for Clause 28, Paul was the only person who didn't on the Conservative ranks. So he had great principles, and he worked tremendously hard, not just in this council chamber as mayor and as cabinet member, committee chairman and forensic questioner, but in a huge range of outside organisations. Denise and I will know about his work for the Cutbush and Coral Arms houses over the years. It's often said that people leave a town, or borough as a whole, I should say, not just the town of Maidstone, much better when they left than when they arrived. But with Paul, it's not just something you say because we're being polite. It's actually true. He made a very big difference to Maidstone for the good. Didn't always agree with him, but he always tried to do the best for the people of Maidstone as he saw it. And we will miss him because he kept us up to a certain standard of work in what we did. And if we did something wrong, or officers and members weren't delivering according to his high standards, he would tell us in no uncertain words. So Paul, thank you for everything you did, if you're listening.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Mrs. Gooch, please.
Thank you, Chairman, Mr. Mayor. Paul Oldham. He won a scholarship to Oxford, graduated with a history degree, had a successful career in finance, travelled all over the world. Locally, he was a great local historian, great intellect, philanthropist, Mayor of Maidstone, 1993, said that bit, cabinet member, served for 25 years as a borough councillor until he retired in 2008. He wouldn't have a television or a computer in the house. All his letters were handwritten. I still have the letter that he wrote to me when I became chairman of Barming Parish Council. It was a lovely letter, I still have it. He was a strong advocate for owning land in order to protect it from development all those years ago. What a prophet. In Barming, he was a key player in assisting the parish council to assemble separately owned parcels of land for what became our parish field. And it's in constant use to this day. I understand that even the day before he died, he was regaling to his family members on the history of Barming Bridge, dating back to the 1700s. That would have been Paul all over, history through and through. For Teesson, he co-founded the Teesson Land Conservation Trust to help protect the countryside around Teesson from developers. That trust now owns 22 acres around Teesson. He set up the William and Edith Oldham Charitable Trust in memory of his parents. So many things. Governor of Astor of Hever, former trustee of Rochester Bridge Trust, Cobtree we've already mentioned. Highly intelligent, accomplished man, a gentleman. He was my predecessor, I'm proud to say, ward member for Barming and Teesson. He has left a lasting memory for both his parishes and way beyond, and may he rest in peace.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Could I ask Councillor Tom Sams to speak, please?
Thank you. When asked to say a few words about Paul, I thought back. Paul always wanted what was best for Maidstone, and when he got to his feet as a young, inexperienced councillor, he most certainly listened. He was strong-willed and determined, always genuine and extremely knowledgeable, and had, as we've already known, a great eye, a keen eye for that detail. Paul had a cutting wit and humour, which he often used with such skill that only afterwards did you see how he did it. His political points made, more often than not, won the vote many, many times. Kind and generous, very, very intelligent. He was genuine and a true servant of this borough. Someone from whom you listened and you learnt, and who you thought and you remember for all the very right reasons of being a true councillor. Our thoughts are with his family and friends at this time. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. Can I call on Councillor Cleater to speak, please?
I can't say I met Paul as a member, obviously, but my abiding memory of Paul, who I saw a lot in the town, was marching down the Tunbridge Road with his briefcase and his paper, and then sitting having a coffee when I was walking around town. But the one thing I do remember is being a member of the public at a committee meeting, asking a question on some funding, and listening to Paul in the chamber with his wit, his kindness, but his razor-like questioning of the poor officer over the finances of a particular thing. He was never rude, he was never shouty, but he was just had that forensic brain that got to the nub of what he wanted. He was not my political persuasion, as I'm sure everyone would know, but he was a man of integrity. He was very well thought of by the public, and the people that I became involved with in a certain campaign thought a lot of him, even when they were disagreeing with him. If you want an example of what public life should be, about what public service should be, what an elected member should be, I think you can look no further than Paul Oldham. On behalf of our group, I would like to offer my sincere condolences to his family, and for the people of Maidstone, please remember what you will benefit from this man's legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. And now, Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So much has been said that I'd just like to thank Paul Oldham for a lifetime of commitment to Maidstone and his love of history and heritage. Paul's been a beneficiary through his family trust to the council and our museum twice in the last few years. He's supported our current gallery refurbishment project, and he's now arranged to donate a considerable sum to revamp our Story of Maidstone Gallery. Perhaps we might even call that gallery the Paul Oldham Gallery in his respect, as a sign of all the work he's done for the borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. And now, of course, obviously we lost Marion Ring, who was a dedicated councillor here. She said things as they were, and I liked her for that. But I think if others can speak on her behalf, that they obviously have some other points they might like to raise. Councillor Burton.
Again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a little different to the first tribute. I feel that I actually did know Marion pretty well in the end. When I first arrived at the council, she was a cabinet member and probably held us newbies in some sort of shape of awe and careful regard. But then, ensuing that, I got to know her better and was indeed in cabinet with her, and learned of her dogged determination, her passionate to do right by, and she had a catchphrase, and I've said this before, and forgive me for saying it again, them's my people. That's what she stood for, them's my people. If we were talking about housing or the like, it was because it was her people that she felt so passionately for. And she was a champion of people with housing crisis. People would turn to her and you know, with her years of experience, she knew the system and she would help people as best she can. But her help didn't stop there. It's one thing to find somebody that house. The next minute she was on the phone ringing around to see if anybody had a spare sofa, a bed, a cooker. She didn't stop at just, you know, making the phone calls and cajoling the housing department. She cared hands-on, and I think she was known in her community and her ward for exactly that. She was mayor. In a way, she was robbed of that special year because it was the COVID time, but she has that rather unique accolade in recent times. Her name's up there twice because she carried us through as our mayor throughout that COVID period where we couldn't even meet. And she did that with integrity and passion and care and feeling. She became a good friend, and sometimes her and her husband Richard would come and visit, and she would always bring her grandson Aidan, and they'd sit in the garden, and Aidan would, I don't know, go around the field or whatever, and she would sit there, and the love and the care that she exercised to other people was built on the way she had her family. She was the matriarch in many ways of that family. She was the matriarch of her ward. Gosh, we do miss her. And again, on behalf of the Conservative Party, we reiterate our condolences to her family and friends.
Thank you. Councillor English.
It's a sad evening when you have to remember two people who've made such an impression on Maidstone. I knew Marion quite well, I think. It's fair to say I don't think she intended at the beginning of her involvement to become a borough councillor. She saw a lot going wrong in Shetway and Gravitt and tried to get the councillors who were in office at the time to take some interest in sorting out those issues. Now, as those of us who knew her remember only too well, Marion wasn't the sort of person who would take, "No, we can't help you," as the answer. So after quite a lot of pushing and not getting much response from the then incumbents, Marion was encouraged by another former councillor, Paulina Stockel, to get involved and begin to sort out the issues herself. Suffice to say, some years later, we can see that Marion was extremely effective in sorting out the issues and helping the communities which she was so proud to serve. Now, it's fair to say that Marion and I did not always agree on issues, but what I could agree with and strongly remember is her sheer integrity and passion for helping those people, above all, who needed the help most. Marion was always there for people who needed help, and often at great inconvenience to herself. That, you know, it's easy to sort of send an email, send a letter, do a phone call or two, but Marion, as Councillor Burton said, would go beyond and above and beyond that sort of basic service, which I hope all councillors do, and really put herself into turning people's lives around and being a support for them when they needed it in the hardest of times. It's difficult to keep putting other people first, and Marion was one of those people who did, despite increasingly bad health over her last few years of her life. It did slow her down, but it didn't slow her down as much as perhaps, in a way, it should have done, because I can't help feeling that sometimes she actually went out there and did things which perhaps other people would have gone home and laid down in a darkened room and recovered instead. So thank you, Marion, for all that you did for the people that you represented, and in showing us that hard work and integrity and passion really can make a difference in people's lives. On behalf of my group, we pay tribute to her work and send condolences to her family and friends.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Chairman. You've all been very polite so far about Marion, because she struck me as being forthright, and you did not mess with her. She frightened the pants off me when I was a new councillor. She was there, she was direct, she had a job to do, she did it, like it or not. I personally saw another side to Marion. Well, perhaps it was there all the time, but it wasn't always obvious. You see, every year bereavement services hold an annual service at Vinters Park, Crem, for people to come and remember their loved ones, and the mayor and all councillors are invited. So, sure enough, I sat next to Marion when she was mayor during the service there, and as usual, the service was, it was lovely, it was moving, and Marion could sense, as I sat next to her, that I was getting a little bit upset. I was thinking about Mum. She didn't say a word. What she did do, she just put her hand and covered my hand. And that was it was a wonderful gesture, and it was a wonderful comfort. And that has stayed with me. And I have to say, I reckon that demonstrates her character beautifully, because she really did everything she could for the residents that she deeply, deeply cared about. And on behalf of my group, I'd like to really offer her family our really deepest condolences, because by golly, she's a missed lady. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Councillor Janetta Sams, please.
Sorry, I can't turn my...
Thank you. Marion epitomised what each and every one of us should aspire to. She worked so hard on behalf of her residents, her community, who she loved and who loved her. She always spoke how she felt, and she used simple, uncomplicated language. Few words, but speaking always from the heart. Her sincerity shone through. She was generous in spirit, kind in how she always welcomed you into this town hall. She was forthright and determined and one of a kind. And we shall all miss her. Our thoughts go to her family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. Got two more people here. Maureen Cleater, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, what can I say about Marion? If you think she was forthright as a councillor, try being her shop steward when you were in a meeting where she had a grievance against a manager, because that's what I had to do. And I said to her, Marion, if I just tap you like this, it's time to shut up. Unfortunately, I was doing this and she was still going. I've known Marion, oh gosh, well, we both worked for KCC, and I started with KCC in 1987, and she was a cleaning supervisor. And a grievance wasn't really about her own case. It was on behalf of the staff, and she was really going for it. And I think you were very polite there in what you said about her forthrightness and saying it like it is, because she sure as heck gave Kevin Harlock a run for his money that day as senior officer. So fast forward to when I got elected and Councillor Dan Wilkinson got elected, and her attitude was to me, well, what kept you? What's taken you so long? I thought you'd be here a long time ago with me. You're in the wrong party, but, you know, you're here, that's what counts. And that was Marion all over. She would fight her corner relentlessly, and usually for other people at cost to herself. She was supportive of new councillors, but you're quite right, Councillor Gooch, she'll tell you off if she thinks you're doing something wrong. She was incredibly supportive to the newbies on my group, and I'm including myself in that, and has always been supportive post-election as well. I agree. The fact that COVID, she missed out on what would have been a wonderful mayoral year, and although she holds that record there, and I think the last time we had multiple entries was during World War II, but it would have been lovely for her to have had a mayoral year like she deserved. My heart goes out to her family. She's a hard act to follow. I was one of her ward councillors along with Councillor Cook, but she was a phenomenon. She will be remembered, and she, cross-party I would say, was loved for her wit, her forthrightness, her sense of humour, and just don't upset her, because that was the case. If you upset her, you were in for it. But she always did everything with kindness, with love, and always on behalf of other people. Marion, you were one of a kind. You will be missed.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. And last one, Councillor Harper.
Where do you start? Marion has been a champion of the people, not just her beloved Chetway, but for all Maidstone. She was a real grassroots politician. Marion said it as it was, and that was one of the things I really loved about her. You knew what she believed in, and you knew what you'd get with Marion. And she had a heart of gold, and that's what underlined it all. Marion, as mentioned earlier, was our mayor through the awful COVID pandemic, when in those 2 years from 2019 to 2021, we couldn't meet in person, and we were having to have our council meetings on, I can't remember now, virtual reality. It was either Teams or Zoom or whatever. But Marion, with her humour and her calm dignity, help the council approach those meetings and to actually get through what we needed to do, even though we couldn't be together in this chamber doing it. And for that was a really good skill, and that summed up Marion's ability to cut through the cracks. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that word, but that's where Marion would be. And that just underlined her all the way from 2003, when she got elected in Shetway North, until she retired from the council. Marion's knowledge on housing was second to none, and I'm sure, like a lot of people here, she helped me when I first got elected to the council in terms of housing issues, and she said, go to this person, let's sort it out. And she was just like that, as she has been, I'm sure, with lots of us over the time. I worked quite closely with Marion, especially towards the end of her period on the Policy and Resources Committee, where despite our different badges, we worked together on various issues, and one of the last ones I remember working with Marion on was a scheme to try to get recycling shops into our recycling centres, as Surrey County Council down the road do. But to sum up, Marion, you were one of a kind, and it was a real honour and privilege to have known and worked with you. Rest in peace, Marion.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. That concludes all the comments so far. We've all probably got wonderful memories of Marion that I certainly have some, because quite often she'd confront me, but very nicely, to be honest. But anyway, we'll all remember her, and she'll live on, basically. Her spirit will. We'll move on. There are no petitions this evening. We've got a question and answer session for local residents. Received notification that Mr. Paul Thomas wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development.
Does it come on? Lovely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In relation to the local plan review and a specific example, the emerging allocation relating to Abbeygate Farm, firstly, can the leaders and the leaders of the political groups please explain how they can continue to support a review whereby it has no benefit to existing residents and in fact decreases their quality of life? A clear example of this is the failure of the 3 South Ward councillors to object to the proposed allocation LPRSA 265 from the outset. It is clear that this site has considerable planning reasons why it should have been rejected in favour of other sites when the sequential testing was put in place.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper will respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So the emerging local plan review, including the proposed site allocations, has emerged over many years through public consultation, legal duty to cooperate discussions, wider engagement with stakeholders, including residents, businesses, councillors, neighbouring authorities, infrastructure providers, community groups, statutory bodies, and indeed landowners. Abbeygate Farm, the specific example which Mr. Thomas raises, has been a proposed allocation within the local plan review since 2020 as part of the Regulation 18 Preferred Approaches document that was consulted on in December of that year. The allocation has formed part of the spatial strategy for the local plan review ever since, including in the draft for submission document that was consulted on in 2021. The spatial strategy, including this allocation, has also been considered by an inspector appointed by the Secretary of State as part of the recent local plan review examination in public. The inspector appears to have accepted the allocation subject to his proposed main modifications. In addition to providing much needed housing, the policy requires a landscape-led master plan. Furthermore, the policy requires the farm to deliver community woodland of no less than 5 hectares, enhanced pedestrian and cycle connectivity, enhancement of the public right-of-way, enhancement to public transport services, a biodiversity net gain, and open space incorporating children's play space and community allotments. Developers are also, in addition to these infrastructure requirements required to pay a non-negotiable community infrastructure levy charge, which is based on the amount of new floor space. This levy is then spent directly on infrastructure in the borough to the benefit of all residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Do you have a response, Mr. Thomas? That has to be, it's a supplementary question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development arising out of your original question or the reply.
Yes, I do. Mr. Mayor, that's a very generic response, which is typical response as seen by residents. The concern that a lot of residents, especially existing residents, are finding is that it's all now moving through the plan.
Mr. Thomas, sorry to interject.
All right.
Can you ask your question, please?
Yeah. The question is, around the chamber, you've got councillors that sit on the Joint Transport Board. You've got twin hatters that sit on the County Council and Borough Council and the MPs. And it's the lack of the infrastructure.
You're going to have to ask the question, please.
Yeah. What I'm trying to say is, are you prepared as a council to work together beyond the local plan allocations to accept that there are issues for local residents of infrastructure, and your current approach by not working together with the county and MPs are actually detrimental?
Councillor Cooper.
Mr. Mayor, yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Thank you. I've received notification that Miss Alison Sweetman wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development.
Good evening. My question is, did Maidstone Borough Council put a response into the Regulations 19 consultation for the pre-submission draft of the Kent and Mineral and Waste Local Plan?
Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As of yet, no, we haven't. The consultation does run, is still ongoing, and it's therefore expected that a response will be provided in line with the Council's previous responses to such consultation. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Is the impact on Maidstone of hard rock quarrying, particularly with the potential expansion over Wrench and Woodland, not worthy of Maidstone Borough Council's comment, given the botched response to the previous consultation? Why have you not provided a timely, properly discussed and agreed response?
Councillor Cooper.
I think there are 2 points there. Firstly, this is not a consultation on the spatial strategy, so the inclusion or otherwise of Hermitage Quarry is totally irrelevant to this consultation. And secondly, the consultation is ongoing, so there is no reason to believe that we can't provide a response on time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you very much. I've received notification that Councillor Coates wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council.
Thank you for asking me this question. Question to the Leader of the Council. Stanton Oakwood Independents welcome the Council's ongoing commitment to addressing climate change and biodiversity and the desire to make Maidstone carbon neutral by 2030. Previously, the Council had asked the Cabinet to reduce the number of targets to make them more manageable and deliverable. However, it seems that in addition to the target set in 2023, we have now increased the number by the additional items in the latest committee round. Can the Leader please explain how, with our limited resources, how can the Council achieve all these proposals by December 2029 So to be carbon neutral by January 2030. Thank you.
Councillor Burton, can you respond to that, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Fant and Oakwood Independents. Conservative Leader, delighted to respond to you. Thank you for your question. Look, my starting point is to recall what my old headmaster said to me once. I'd been invited to his study to some sort of careers discussion, and I'd sort of said, well, I want to do this, 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 and this, and he said, yeah, Muhammad said it was better to aim for the top of the mountain and only get halfway up than it is to only aim halfway up and not even get there. So I think it's right that this council has the highest possible aspirations. So set the target right to the top of the mountain. Secondly, I believe this is about leading by example. And I give you an example of that. You know, so there's things that we can do, and decarbonising our own property is one of those. And I'm delighted that we've just been awarded £3.2 million public sector decarbonisation scheme money to help us do that. So we're fortunate that we have that financial assistance, but this council will be leading by example of what is possible. We were also privileged to be able to award money to some of our rural communities through the UK Prosperity Rural Fund to allow them to put exemplars into their own community halls, to show how solar can work, perhaps with a battery, perhaps with air source heat pumps, who knows, and demonstrate hands-on by example how cost-effective and carbon beneficial those measures are. So leading by example is key. Now, there are lots of targets, there are lots of moving parts to this. The fact that we finally got that big lump of money to start doing some stuff was work that was going on behind the scenes for a long time. You know, several attempts to bid, a ridiculous bidding scheme, but we prevailed nonetheless. So if we've got more objectives than we had before, and we've got more bits of the machine in train, they won't all fruit at the same time, it won't deplete our resources, but let's try everything we can to move forward for the most ambitious target. We're not helped by some of the things that, you know, government has done by, you know, moving goalposts to 2035 and not 2030. But let's not be daunted. You know, I think this council is committed to doing the best it can. It is committed to leading by example.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Received notification that Councillor Harper wishes to ask a... sorry. Yeah, there is, of course, yeah. There is an opportunity there for a supplementary question.
I'm not asking a supplementary.
Okay, that's fine. I've received notification that Councillor Harper wishes to ask a question of the Chairman of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the proposed changes to the Constitution, discussed at an all-members workshop on the 20th of November 2023 and elsewhere, to replace the Overview and Scrutiny Committee by Policy Advisory Scrutiny Committees, or Policy Overview and Scrutiny Committees, I think that is now. Can the Chairman of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee explain when out of 19 councillors at the workshop, only 4 voted for the current system of governance and 15 to change it? How comes the Democracy and General Purposes Committee ignored the democratic wishes of the council? Of councillors, rather.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So, Democracy and General Purposes Committee did take into account the views of councillors from the workshop in their deliberations when we were considering whether a change was needed at this point. I think it is worth noting that of the 19 councillors who are present on the night, the split was slightly different to how Councillor Harper has represented it. 11 were in favour of the policy overview and scrutiny committees, and 8 were in favour of other models which were either the model that we have now or minor tweaks on those models. The decision of Democracy and General Purposes was to continue with the current governance arrangements as it stands for the beginning of the new municipal year, given that there will be such a change in the numbers of councillors and indeed the first all-out election in a number of years. However, it was made perfectly clear at that time that it must be put on the work programme in the new municipal year for Democracy and General Purposes and indeed Council to consider this matter further. So I don't think it would be fair to say that the committee ignored the views of councillors. We may have come to a different conclusion or in terms or different timings to what other people had determined to be right, but it was taken into account. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Harper, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Chairman of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee rising out of your original question or the reply?
Just a very quick question. I'm looking at the report which went to your committee on the 31st of January, where it says that out of the 19 people present, 11 votes were cast for the model which was not adopted, 4 votes were cast for the model which is the current system, and then 4 were cast for a further one. So it was clear that the majority did vote for the proposed change. So I'd like to know how he squares that up with what he said earlier. And I won't ask anything further other than that, because I have subsequently put an amendment we shall be discussing in a minute forward.
Thank you, Councillor Harper.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think we can square it in that there was certainly a view that there needs to be changes, and we did vote to have some changes. We certainly voted to immediately change the number of policy advisory committees as of the beginning of the new municipal year, and we agreed that we would keep this under constant review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I received notification that Councillor Thompson wishes to ask a question of the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, before I ask my question, I would like, with respect to the memories of honoured colleagues previously, simply to note, as was our original intention, our sincere thanks and gratitude to particularly to councillors who will be standing down at the end of this term of office. Certainly for myself as a new councillor here, I'm extremely grateful for the warmth, the professionalism, the hand of friendship and indeed political generosity that has been extended to me. I'm grateful for it, and I know that I speak for others. It is good to single out the singular example of colleagues, as we noted previously. It is not unique. Thank you all to colleagues. If I might move on, please, with my question to the Cabinet Member for Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development. What assessment of impact on the local plan review has been made following the recent news that Medway Council is facing bankruptcy, specifically the impact that the news on the plans for the proposed 2,000 homes in Lidsing and the future residents who will undoubtedly expect to access many aspects of Medway's local services and be part of their community as much as Maidstone's? Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, can you respond?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We are at a point in the local plan review where the council's ability to make wholesale changes are very much limited to the inspector who's been appointed by the Secretary of State. However, specifically the development which Lidsing, which will be affected most by Medway's infrastructure, where it is it's towards the back end of the plan. The plan will be reviewed on a 5-yearly basis. So that will need, if there is any change in that situation, that will need to be taken into account as we roll into the next local plan review. However, at the moment, we are certain through our duty to cooperate with Medway Council and for our discussions with infrastructure providers that there should not be any significant impact on the infrastructure required to make this plan sound. And indeed, if there were to be, then there would need to be a reconsideration at a subsequent plan review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Thompson, do you wish to ask a supplementary question of the Cabinet Member for planning and economic development that arises out of the original question or your reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Cooper, for that indicative response. Please would you consider perhaps after this meeting providing detail of what the process might be by which Maidstone Borough Council can show its good faith and best efforts in making the kinds of adaptations that would be necessary in the dire financial situation that would be posed by what we might expect in Medway in the foreseeable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper.
I can indeed answer that question now. There is already a process in place, and that is to continually monitor the infrastructure delivery plan, which is what we have to do, and we will continue doing so. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I understand that it's been agreed that each group leader will waive their right to respond. Can I please? No? Oh, 12, there we are. Call upon the Leader of the Council to submit his report on current issues. Councillor Burton, can you speak for up to 5 minutes, please?
Mr. Mayor, it is the custom and practice of this council that the leader doesn't hog the stage with a report on the budget night. I will speak more substantively on the matter of the budget, and then we have further business later in the evening, which might also take some time. So with the agreement of all present, I will not make that speech this evening.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I have made my protestations known about dropping this item. I do think it would have been a good opportunity for the leader to sum up his term of office, and before we move into the new council, particularly with all member elections, and particularly as this is the last scheduled for council. We did discuss this in depth at the group leaders meeting yesterday, but sadly I think I lost the argument. Personally, I would have also valued the opportunity to thank members who are standing down in May, and I do take this opportunity to do so now. Thank you for your service. It did occur to me that Councillor Burton may be trying to avoid members saying nice words about him this evening. And frankly, I do think, Councillor Burton, you're a decent guy, so I'm going to overrule things and say some nice words. Right, there you are, decent guy. During that debate yesterday, I learnt a bit about Councillor Burton's plans post-election. He described how difficult government at all levels was going to become, and said he would rather lead the rebellion rather than face the rebellion. Revolution, okay, rather than face the revolution. So as I sat there last night wondering how best to thank David for his service, I was searching Amazon Prime for the perfect present, which would have been a new model army uniform for our very own Councillor Fairfax. But I had to settle for something a little more up-to-date and French. David, this is for you. It's from all of your fellow group leaders, and I do expect you to be wearing it as you storm the barricades.
I understand it's been agreed that each group leader will waive their right to respond. Can I have confirmation that this is the case? Thank you. Nice touch. I'll now open this item to we've 13. Where are? Oh yeah. Call upon. Sorry. Yeah. I'll open this item to questions from council members for a period of 15 minutes. Questions may be on any subject relevant to the role of the leader. No? No? Okay, waived. Right. The annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Call upon Councillor English to present the annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. To move that it be noted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is on your papers this evening. It's been a slightly different year than the first year. We've been concentrating far more on pre-decision scrutiny. We have also had, in percentage terms, a massive upturn in call-ins. We actually had 3. I think it's fair to say that the committee has, I think, asked some very probing questions, done some very good work, and by and large, there have been some exceptions, but by and large have got a reasonable degree of engagement from the Cabinet. It's early days yet, and I still think the system has some way to go before it's fully bedded in, and I do actually, looking at future debates on this agenda, hope that it is given time to bed in, because arrangements and constitutions need to grow into place, and rushing to judgment on them is unwise. I would, at this point, want to add one simple observation to the report that's on the papers. Councillor Cleater and I were involved in preparing this, but the officer who brought the report together was too modest, and the committee last night wanted to place on record that the work that we have achieved this year, and I think it's quite substantial, could not have been done without the dedicated work of our Democratic Services team, and in particular Ms Parfitt, who has gone above and beyond in terms of delivering our programme so far this year. Obviously, we've got a couple of months still to go. I commend the report to this committee. Oh, sorry.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is the annual report of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee noted? Thank you. Call upon Councillor Cooper to move the recommendations of the Democracy and General Purposes Committee relating to amendments to the Constitution. Recommendations on pages 18 and 19.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council be recommended to approve the amendments as detailed in Appendix 1 of the report. I won't read them out, as detailed on pages 18 and 19 of our agenda papers. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Councillor Harper, would you like to move an amendment?
Surprisingly, I would. I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendations. I won't read them out in full because we've all been circulated with them, and I'm sure they'll obviously appear in terms of the Council's minutes for members of the public to read. I'm sure no one's surprised, given I asked the question of the Chair of Democracy and General Purposes earlier, that I'm moving this amendment. It came out of discussions I've had with a number of other senior councillors over the last couple of days, that we felt that the issue really needed to be given more attention. A larger number of councillors did attend the All Members Workshop in November last year, and during 2022, the previous year, I was involved with a group of leading members then, including Councillor Perry, Councillor English, Councillor Pearl as it was, and Councillor Cox, to look at the Constitution after our first year of operation and to see if we felt at that stage we needed to make amendments. Now, we had in those discussions the idea and the embryo of the idea of perhaps replacing overview and scrutiny by the policy overview and scrutiny committees. We decided at that point we would not move it forward because it wasn't in the remit of that review group at that time. I believe that that is a better way to manage the council. I think it will give a larger number of people the ability to be involved in the work of the council. I think it will also, moving over to policy overview and scrutiny committees, enhance our decision making as an authority and do a better job than we can do with our policy advisory committees we have now. The current policy advisory committees and overview and scrutiny committees have been tried for 2 years, and they don't particularly work all that well. There is a large frustration amongst members, with frequently at policy advisory committees wishing to look at an area in more detail, but then being instructed by the officers, as they need to, as is the Constitution, that they can't actually look into these issues. And we have a current overview and scrutiny committee which can only, again, look at a relatively small number of decisions. So the vast majority of decisions which members would wish to look into in detail do not get the chance to be reviewed. Our current constitution and methods of working were never intended to be the last word. We need the new method of working to make better informed decisions and involve more people. After May 2024...
Sorry, Councillor, your time's come to an end.
Okay. I reserve my right to reply to the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there a seconder for that? Yes, Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Burton. Oh, right, okay. Councillor Burton. Is that right? Let's have Councillor Jeffrey then. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't speak too long. As we've heard, the whole council workshop favoured option B by quite a majority. We've heard a little bit about the shortcomings of the PAC systems and the level of frustration within them, particularly the kind of lack of teeth and the inability to go into depth. I do hope that members have all explored the two models, and given that the Democracy and General Purposes Committee went against the fairly overwhelming will of the workshop, I'm pleased that that decision can be put to the test amongst the wider council.
Thank you. Councillor Burton and then Councillor Webb, please. Councillor English and Councillor Burton and Councillor Webb.
Unfortunately, the workshop was held on an evening where my group had a constituency meeting, so with the exception of myself, none of the Liberal Democrat members were able to attend that meeting. So all I can say is that our view was, shall we say, a little muted by the timetable there. That's the problem when you have so many workshops. Yes, there are problems and issues with the current constitution. Every single one of those could be addressed without the proposed remedy that's being put forward here. There are issues with things to go on agendas, and I'm not aware of major issues, with one exception that Councillor Nagy is aware of, not being addressed. Then there are ways of doing that. What I don't see before me is a system which actually engages more people. In fact, I can't understand how you remove a major committee which is deliberately designed to ensure that the smaller parties of this council can have seats on it, replace it with 3 packs which will have 9 members on them, and still have a position where the smaller parties can contribute to those discussions. The smaller groups, if they support this, are effectively saying, well, we're not going to be involved unless we give up all our places on actual decision-making bodies like planning, licensing, and so forth, and prioritise just scrutiny. Councillor Cooper has pointed out earlier, we are not saying that there should not be any changes. What we are saying is that there is a lot of work to be done if a better model is to be evolved. And the constitution we have now is the product of a lot of considered work. If we want to change it, yes, we can change it, but what we shouldn't be doing is rushing to judgment, trying to correct what are perceived faults with a solution that is actually not thought through and which will be very difficult to think through by the time of the annual meeting, leaving aside the ethical question of whether an outgoing council of which a considerable number of members of people are not restanding should impose a system on people who have not yet been elected. So I will conclude by saying that I am not ruling out changes, and I think they could be done. But we've got to be very careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got a position at the moment where opposition parties are guaranteed a role. If we're not very careful with this scrutiny proposal that Councillor Harper's come up with, we could have a situation where scrutiny becomes the function of the executive. There's nothing in here that prevents that, and we've got to be very, very
Councillor
careful.
English, your time
And
is
I'm just finishing.
up.
That we do not solve one problem by creating 25 more.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Burton?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm speaking to the amendment, not as the seconder to the original motion. I strongly support this amendment, and my support is based on experience. This is essentially how things were once before during my time here at Maidstone. What it allowed was to develop experience for overview and scrutiny function within the portfolios of the committees, so that those with the greatest interest made the deepest dive into the subject, and it was the excellent way that backbenchers could actually positively contribute to policy development. It gives backbenchers the best opportunity to make a difference. It worked. On the matter of imposing a constitution onto our successors, if we don't change it, we impose the one we have. It's the same difference we impose. And the new council will be entirely within its privilege to change things. Absolutely right. But I do think that the duty of the council here now, with the experience that sits in this chamber, can actually do the best now for our successors in May. I strongly believe that marrying overview and scrutiny into the packs is the right thing. I strongly believe that. Whether you have 3 packs or 3-pack overview and scrutiny or 4, fine-tuning. At the moment it's in the jurisdiction of the proper officer to decide how many of those there actually is. But all I can say to you, and as Councillor Jeffrey pointed out earlier, why should I worry? Well, I care deeply about the future of this council. I've seen how it worked once before. I've observed how it's worked this last year. I'm not going to be critical of overview and scrutiny this last year, but they tried to cover a massive amount of territory. They had an inordinate number of meetings at times, and that workload would have been better spread across the council. So, as far as my group's concerned, I strongly think this is a free vote. There's no whipped position, but I urge you to give merit to Councillor Harper's amendment, which I will support.
Councillor Webb.
Yes, thank you. And I'm quite glad we're not being whipped, because I'd probably be whipped out of the chamber. Because I would like to say, first of all, that as I sit on overview and scrutiny, and I also sit on scrutiny in another chamber not far from here, that I do believe this works. I do believe overview and scrutiny has a key function for this council, and without that, the challenge to the Cabinet and relevant decisions would be missed. Picking up one of the points from Councillor Harper, it's gone on and on and on, in the nicest sense, that 19 councillors put forward their views. There are 55 councillors, I think, in this council, so there were a great number of councillors that didn't. So I think that 19 is probably misrepresented. I would like to, at the same time, and I am feeling well, and I'm not about to be hospitalised, I would like to praise actually the Chair and the Vice Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, because I have enjoyed being on that committee. We haven't always agreed, but the debate at Overview and Scrutiny, I felt, has been very worthwhile. And however many committees there are likely to be in the future, I do think it is worthwhile to keep the current structure as it is. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Blackmore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I hate to disagree with the leader of my group and the leader of the council. And indeed, I very rarely disagree with him. In fact, I usually agree with every single word of claptrap that flows from his mouth. But on this subject, I do disagree with the point about changing the government structure. Now, I think Councillor Burton has raised a very serious point that, you know, there is an issue with engagement and policy development amongst the backbenchers. Now, unfortunately, I'm not a backbencher, so clearly I think that, you know, it's great. You know, I get lots of view in developing policy, but we need to engage all 55 councillors, and I do think we need to do that better, regardless of what the governance arrangements are. We're never always going to agree on things. In fact, I'm glancing around the chamber here, and actually, I'd probably agree with 80% of what most people say. But unfortunately, it's only ever the 20% that we have to discuss in this chamber. However, we need to make sure those views are aired. At the moment, scrutiny has done a tremendous job because it is not a function of the administration, whereas to an extent I suspect the PACs are. And I think moving that scrutiny function to what is essentially a glorified PAC will turn the scrutiny function into a function of the administration or the coalition of the administration. And I think that is very dangerous. It is set up at the moment very specifically to provide a check and balance. Now, I've been hauled to scrutiny, thank you very much to Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor English, to justify my position when a large group of people have been in disagreement with decisions I've made. I've been to scrutiny to talk about various scrapes. I think that level of thought and that level of engagement would not exist if we moved the scrutiny function into the PACs, because we would be whipped. Let's face it, when we have whipped votes, usually the large portion of your group will vote the way that you want them to vote for. And we have to run this council, not for the 55 councillors or however many councillors we've got going forwards, we have to run this council in a way that is representative and allows us to make those difficult decisions which are required for the residents of our borough, and not get bogged down in ideological dogma, which I fear can happen if we move to, or certainly rush to, a new governance structure at this stage. For that reason, I will not be supporting Councillor Harper's amendment, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Blackmore, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say, actually, Councillor Cooper, you mentioned not being a backbencher. That can be arranged. You know, we can have words with Councillor Burton, so don't worry about that. You know, everything is possible in this chamber. It is the art of the possible. What's really interesting is whenever we make a change to any type of system, the one thing everyone talks about is this will engage more councillors. More councillors will turn up to X, more councillors will do Y. I'm sorry, I've been around this chamber for 20 odd years, and I don't think it makes a jot of difference. It's whether people are engaged in here and in here. And if they're engaged in their head and their heart, yes, that's how it happens. It's not whether you have this committee or that committee. That doesn't make a jot of difference. So I'm so sorry. I can't vote for the new system. I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor English, which is just the weirdest experience. But hey, let's roll with it, shall we? I don't think Overview and Scrutiny would have undertaken the water review, because we would have been looking at our policies and what Maidstone Borough Council does. That just wouldn't have happened. So I think if we change to a different system, personally, I think it's wrong. We've only had the current framework for 2 years, and I think we should stick with it. If every time we don't like something, we dump it, we'll get nowhere. So I disagree with the leader. Gosh, that sounds good. I will be voting for your amendment, and I must say I'm really pleased you brought it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackmore.
Sorry, sorry. I'm going to vote against it. I'm really sorry. It's just the overexcitement of it all.
Yeah. Councillor Perry, follow that.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. I shall not be supporting the amendment either. I very much support the what Councillor English said right at the very beginning, actually. And I think he was absolutely right. This is You're not happy. I think we're all going to be sacked tonight. But the reason is that the current system was subject to a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. It was briefly mentioned by Councillor Harper. I sat on it, and Councillor English did, and Councillor Cooper, and we went into it in great detail. And I don't think it's right to suddenly ditch something that was thought through very carefully. Now, one of the key things in it was the PACs, which is coming for a lot of statement. I actually think making a PAC and a scrutiny committee is a contradiction in terms, because it actually sets up an adversarial system when that was never the reason for setting up the PACs. The setting up the PACs was A, to involve more councillors. Yes, I think that's incredibly important. The old committee system did that, but I think it was slow in terms of its decision making. But the PAC was a compromise. It was a hybrid system. I think we actually used that word right at the beginning of the discussions, and that is very important because they're there to work with the Cabinet, not against the Cabinet, but to work with it. And I think this is something that this amendment completely misses out. And the other point I would make is I'm not so over-impressed with having massive overview and scrutiny committees. I know our leader likes them. Personally, I don't think they work that well, actually, in the past. I think the present committee, and I was actually privileged to sit on it as not an expert, but someone who had a very strong interest in the water management work that was done. And I witnessed the process that went through on that, and it was very, very, very sound. They went into a lot of detail. They brought in expert witnesses from the Environment Agency, from the Upper Medway Internal Drainage Board, and other expert areas. It worked very, very well, in my view, and I think we should not suddenly rush in and if you like, change it. I don't think we should be doing, particularly when we're about to have an all-out election. So I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Garton? and then Councillor Harper.
Mr. Mayor, unlike a lot of my party members, I do agree with the leader, and he made a very good point why we should change the constitution. However, having sat on the Democracy Committee myself, I think it was felt on that evening that this is not the right time to tackle this problem. We're just less than 8 weeks away from an election. We will have less councillors. We have boundary reviews as the first all-out election in many, many decades. So therefore, we are probably looking at a completely differently composed chamber following May. And I think the system we've got at the moment worked very well for 2 years. Let's hand that over to the next generation of councillors and let them reform the constitution if and when they feel fit. And if I'm then still a councillor, I certainly will vote for an amendment which may be similar to the one tonight. But tonight I cannot support it.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Garton. Nobody else has put their hands up, so Councillor Harper, can you sum up, please?
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to fully endorse all the comments which the Leader of the Council made earlier this evening. I feel slightly sorry for him that he's obviously got lack of support from some of his own side tonight. But fundamentally, people say that if we change the constitution now or look at this amendment, we're setting something in case for the next council. It's the same if you don't do anything, because the next council inherits what we've currently got. And so if you voted for the amendment tonight, it would enable the council at its annual general meeting to make the final decision as to which way it then wished to proceed, either with a cabinet and policy overview and scrutiny models, or to remain with the current system. Because what we're suggesting in the amendment is that detailed work be undertaken to look at how the new model would work, so that that can be submitted for decision at the council annual general meeting. That would enable that meeting to look at the two options before it as a new council and then make the decision as to which one they wish to work with going forward. If we don't approve the amendment and therefore give our successors that option, any decisions will then be delayed by yet a further year. And I think the best we can do is to hopefully, in the spirit of cross-bench unity, which we've all talked about this evening, vote for the amendment and then give our successor council the final choice as to which of the two models it wishes to adopt on the 18th of May. Thank you.
Can we move to the vote on the amendment, please? All those for? That's fine. Those against? There were no abstentions, so the amendment falls. Score on the...
So just to assist members, we have 47 members in the room, 16 people voted for and 31 voted against. So the amendment falls, and now the debate will return to the substantive motion. Thank you.
Oh, right. Okay, so it needs to be, the substantive motion needs to be debated. And no, so okay, we'll move to the vote on it, please, on the substantive motion. All those in favour? Oh, right, turn that.
No, very, very briefly, I am supporting the minor amendments on the papers. I think if you actually scrutinise it, there are a few bits there that need further thinking about in the future, and the chairman of the Democracy Committee is well aware of that. I'd have been less inclined to support it, but these amendments, but it would have clearly clouded matters with the amendment proposed by Councillor Harper if we'd done that. So I do support it, but there is further work to do. And I've got some more of those yellow things in the boot of my car if anybody wants to join me afterwards.
Councillor Cooper, would you like to sum up?
All I would say is that well, I think people, for expediency, people want me to say no, but no, there are a couple of matters where I still am not entirely content with the wording personally, but the committee did decide we can look at it again, see if we can improve that, but none of what is in there makes matters any worse than they currently are. It is not that matters are bad, so obviously I will support it. Thank you.
Are those recommendations agreed? Agreed. Right, I call up. Yeah. Can we have one conversation, please? Thank you. Right, we could call on Councillor Burton. We call on Councillor Burton to move the recommendation of the Employment Committee relating to the pay policy statement of 2024. The recommendations is on page 31.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move, but with some minor amendment. So I move that the proposed pay policy statement 2024 set out at Appendix 1 to the report of the Employment Committee be approved for publication on the Council's website, subject to the following. The information in the tables and organisation structure in Appendix 1G to be updated, including the actual pay figures for the year ending March 2024, which cannot be calculated until the March payroll is complete. So I think it's a technical amendment. The principle is quite clear, but I so move.
Been seconded. Look to see if anyone else is wanting to speak. Yeah, Councillor Cleater and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In speaking on this, I really just wanted to thank our employees for the hard work that they've done over the year. They're probably, like most, would have liked more. And I think as a trade unionist, I would always campaign for more, as everyone well knows. But I think the work that's gone on, not just from our democratic services officers, but our employees throughout, some of whom are dealing with very difficult circumstances and very, very distressed people who are using our services time of great crisis for them, and can sometimes face an awful lot of abuse, to be quite honest. So I'd just like to go on record on behalf of our group, and I'm sure on behalf of all members, our thanks to the staff. Thank you.
Councillor Jeffrey, if they can get by you at the back.
Oh, sorry.
Please, thank you.
Thank you. So while I agree with 99% of what's in the report, and it is a good report, albeit for the 1%, there are now 20 Borough Council employees who will be paid less than the real living wage. The real living wage as defined by the Living Wage Foundation. And that worries me. And I would deeply like to see something resolved around that. So whilst I am happy to vote at this point in favour of this report, I do think there is a little bit more work to be done to sort that issue out, because I do not want our employees being paid less than is reasonable to live on. Thank you.
No. So we agree the recommendations. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Before I call upon Councillor Burton to move the recommendations of the Cabinet relating to the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals for 2024-25, I would remind members that as a consequence of the Local Authorities Standing Orders England Amendment Regulations 2014, there will need to be a recorded vote on any decision relating to the budget or council tax setting. This will enable people to see how their councillors voted. An officer briefing note has been circulated. So I now call upon Councillor Burton to move the recommendations of the Cabinet relating to the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals 2024 to 25. Recommendations on pages 59 to 61. Councillor Burton, you may speak for up to 10 minutes. Is that seconded? No, I'll let him speak first then. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't really know whether to be pleased or not pleased. There are no tabled amendments to the budget. So, you know, when we hear, oh, we should be doing this on wages or we should be doing that, the opportunity to actually move that formally is lost because nobody has. Now, look, put that to one side for a moment. Let me look at it as a good thing. I think what I've always tried to do is to build consensus wherever possible. And I hope that what you're seeing in front of you is something that ticks most of the boxes for most of us. Let's start with stating the obvious. Money's tight. It is blooming tight. So I think we achieve well to bring this as a balanced budget to the council, especially when you take into account a few things. So a few things, for example, The household support grant, gone. Now that helped us keep a welfare officer in post to assist difficult housing cases, prevention work, gave them a small budget to do some actual doings like Marion Ring would have wanted us to actually make difference to people and just help them into their new accommodation and the like. It also supported our work with food larders. Could have supported our work with food larders. What we have managed to do in this budget is to find funding to allow the welfare officer role to continue and funding to keep the larders going whilst we look at a bigger picture solution. And I hope that a more sustainable solution to the larders can be found and that it's not just in the areas that they're focused at the moment, because that need exists in every single one of our wards, I promise you that. Even the most affluent, there's someone that needs that help. So, I think we've got something that bridges that gap. And allow me to speak a word of warning here. Some of these sources of funding, like the household support gap, are drying up and they're stopping. And good work that this council has historically done relied on that. Much as we would like to replace that with our own resources in every instance, we have to be careful not to just say, yeah, well, take that, and we could drive ourselves into a very difficult financial situation. So, I don't envy this council moving forwards, how we will continue to face up to some of those challenges. But I urge us not to just immediately say, well, we can do it, because we are of limited resources. But we have, for this year, found a way to sustain some of those emerging gaps. There was a last-minute curveball as well. Those who follow these things will have seen that county set their budget yesterday. So Monday, we finally had confirmation, oh, by the way, there's £334,000 of waste grant that you're not getting. So we start the day negative that. Within this budget in front of you, there is sufficient contingency that we can, in the first instance, take that in our stride. And then I trust that officers will look to see how we can then optimise that situation, because not being tied by the conditions of that grant allows us to approach some things slightly differently. There might be some waste credits there that we're eligible to, so we might be able to mitigate some of that. But in the first instance, our contingency gives us the headroom to carry on business as usual. But probably in our minds, some of that contingency was there for the big elephant in the room, which is the housing crisis. The pressure on our temporary accommodation mounts. That's where we've got to really keep an eye. So it could have been tempting to sort of free up some other money to go into the budget and leave the 500,000 contingency intact with the waste thing. But I think it will be good that if the housing continues to go in the direction that we have seen, that this council will have to consider a remedy when it faces that, so that we're eyes open and let's all hope that the housing crisis is at its peak and the numbers in temporary accommodation will go down and the problem will go away. Let's all hope that. But if it doesn't, the alarm bells will ring within this budget when that last bit of contingency is spent, and that's going to hit us right between the eyes, and we need to look at that and deal with it for what it is at the time. The other thing that we often overlook when we, vote the budget through or whatever, is the capital programme. So this has probably received more attention than ever before, because we have a very ambitious capital programme here that largely is to meet the 1,000 affordable homes that we've set out to do. That over the coming years creates, in the short term, a cash flow issue until the housing starts to bring in the rent that self-funds the whole thing. So what I'm saying is we've got a very ambitious capital budget there, but we must keep a very, very close eye, and some of the other things in the capital budget could compound on that. But if it's in the capital budget, it doesn't mean the money's sat in a bank account waiting to be spent. It's an intention to borrow, largely. But some of the good news is, like I mentioned earlier, where we've got our climate change action plan, and there's capital money there, but then we actually get additional lumps of money coming in to support our programme. So the 3.2 million decarbonisation fund, that contributes to the capital programme that you have in front of you. What's the other example like that? I was thinking, so on the affordable housing, we've got extremely good terms with Homes England to deliver affordable social housing. They are millions and millions and millions that this council is able to leverage in for the people of Maidstone, because we've got a good track record, we've got sound finances, we've been doing a good job. But the challenge carries on, and let's not lose sight of that. So I am very content to be able to bring to you this budget. It balances, it's sound. We've not gone to the humble motorist and milked them just to prop it up. We continue to support the town centre and the retail in our town centre and not discourage the motorists that come in and actually use our town. We've not had to do that. This is sound, it's well balanced, and most of the, I call it the Gove money that we've been given, but the top-up money, which is New Homes Bonus and the funding, core funding guarantee, we've relied on virtually none of that. That goes lock, stock and barrel into the affordable housing programme as our contribution. Our services are not dramatically cut in any way. We deliver well for the residents of Maidstone. We hold council tax at the 3% limit when we have had inflation in the last 12 months in double figures. I think we do well. I commend this budget to you all.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Councillor Perry. Do you wish to speak?
It's all been said. We have a very sound financial position, and I think I'd like to thank the officers particularly and the whole team for the work they've done on this. I think it's extremely important. But as the leader has said, we are in a very good position. I think we reached the right balance between providing our services, our key services, and maintaining a sound financial position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Cleater, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there were no amendments to the budget, but I think what I would say is other group leaders as well, we've been having regular meetings around the pressures that we face in various different venues and that. One of the things I wanted to discuss today, or at least talk about, you've touched on, which was at least we've managed to keep the funding for the food larders for 6 months while we source other funding. The fact in the 21st century we have to have a food larder anywhere is a disgrace. And I think whenever this general election's coming, a key priority needs to be to get people out of poverty and to make work for working people so they can afford to pay for things. I'm a local government worker. I don't earn what the average wage is, and that's the crisis that we have in housing. So I'm very grateful to Councillor Parfitt-Reid when she reached out. It's absolutely vital that those houses that we're building and voted on are on social rents, because the one thing about affordable rents is, for the average working person, they're unaffordable. That's the truth, and that's the pressure on our budget. Despite tight management, we've seen how the increased costs of homelessness are affecting all local authorities. And I'll be honest, and I can say this because I'm retiring in a couple of weeks, KCC's attitude on this waste management fund has been a disgrace. To actually announce it just in that budget mean they could have turned round and had conversations, senior officer to senior officer, saying, this is in the pipeline, you need to amend your budgets accordingly. But until Monday happened, that was it. And I was actually in the chamber. Probably best I was in the gallery because it was a pretty fraught meeting, I felt. There were comments made about boroughs not getting their auditing done. Well, to be quite frank, Grant Thornton has been spending too much time at Kent County Council sorting their audits out, which is why ours are all behind. In terms of the pressures, and the reason why I'm talking about Kent County Council, there are going to be severe pressures next year on us because of cuts that Kent County Council have made. And they will be expecting us and other boroughs and districts to absorb that. But we can't, because that mess is of their making, it's not of our making. So I'm happy to support this budget, and I would like to thank the 151 officer who's reached out to every group and offered to sit down and discuss the budget with them. I think we're in awful times, to be quite honest, and we really do need to say that whoever wins the next election, that they fund local government properly, because we can't do our job without the funding.
Right, the next one is Councillor English, then Councillor Harper,
I'm sorry.
and then Councillor Jeffries.
I'm sorry, the understanding in previous years when the budget, when the leader's speech has been waived, has always been that the group leaders in turn get 5 minutes to reply to the budget proposal, and that's always been the basis on which it has been waived and the understanding. So I have to say if that's been changed, that shouldn't have been, because frankly that has always been the understanding. It's not it was not a constitutional provision, it was a convention, and it's not...
Councillor English, can you make your point?
I'm making a point about sharp practice. Now, secondly, I would say that this council has benefited over the years from a very cautious financial approach. And that has served us well when other local authorities in Kent and elsewhere have done very foolish things like running down their reserves to subsidise current expenditure. So I and my group are supportive of the general financial programme that is ahead in front of us in terms of the council tax and the amount of money being raised. There are a number of issues that we will be investigating further, but they do not necessarily require us to move budget amendments tonight. I'll focus on 2 particularly. The leader has talked about car parking. The real issue with car parking in Maidstone, I'm not saying that visitor car parking and business car parking is irrelevant, is actually what we do for the residents of Maidstone, increasingly in the town centre, who don't have anywhere to park. That's a fundamental issue we need to address. Another issue with parking is what do we do about the more polluting vehicle pays model. Another issue that I'm glad you touched on in terms of grant funding is that you talked about the Rural Prosperity Fund. I don't know whether your members are aware, but a substantial number of parishes in this borough don't qualify for that. Bearsted is not rural, according to that. So there is a gap we need to look at between the urban prosperity that goes into the town centre and the suburban areas and parishes. So there are a huge amount of things we can do, but very few of them require major amendments or any amendments to the budget tonight, because they can all be addressed through other methods later on. I would, in conclusion, say that I'm very, very glad that the capital programme does not bind us to supporting those things in a capital programme. With one exception, I agree with the capital programme, but the provision for spending £1 million on the Leeds Langley bypass preparations is foolish, because that would mean a massive further uptick in housing provision in order to fund it. So we're glad we're not committed to that. I would say tonight, though, I would hope that my members would support this budget because it is a firm foundation to go forward with. And most of the changes we will be making, if we had the opportunity next year, do not depend on this budget tonight.
Thank you, Councillor English. Councillor Harper.
Since we've only got 3 minutes, I better rattle through what I've got here. So first of all, on behalf of the Fountain Oakwood duo, I'd like to support this budget, and thank you to John Perry for being very collegiate in terms of working the way through the budget with all councillors here tonight. And I'd also like to thank our finance officers as well for working on this and making this process bearable when it's very complicated. But before I address the substance of the report, I've one last person to thank tonight, and that's David, our new yellow shirt leader. I need to thank you for all the work you've done over the last 3 years as council leader. You've striven to keep the council focused and unified. Your leadership's been inclusive, and I know that you've strived to keep all groups and persuasions on the council involved in decision making. And I think the 1,000 affordable homes which you promoted and everyone's adopted is a real fitting legacy for you, and one you should be really proud of as you stand down from the council. I remember prior to you being leader, when you were chair of strategic planning and infrastructure, the two of us worked together in terms of economic development to make sure that we also considered industrial estates and industrial development, not just office development, and how we had a bit of a struggle to get the officers to adopt that. That's by the by. Now I've got another minute and a half for the budget. So this budget gives us a sound base to go into next year. Luckily, the cuts which were agreed by everybody were relatively minor. And I'd just like to draw attention to 3 points in the budget. Firstly, and I do have to mention it, the Maidstone Leisure Centre. I am glad, since I raised it at our last meeting, to see that in the Forward Capital programme, so that we will at some point be able to make a decision as to either refurbish or rebuild. So that's really good. Thank you to everybody concerned for ensuring that got in. Secondly, on the capital programme, which is really ambitious, one thing I would just like to remind people, as I have done at Corporate Services PAC, was that the items in it all need to be very sound in their workings. They need all to demonstrate how each proposal will generate enough cash to pay for the debts we'll have to take out to finance them. And that's from 1,000 affordable homes, from the leisure centre to purchasing new equipment. That's going to be a major test for us and all of that. And thirdly, is biodiversity and climate change. I'm really happy to hear that we were successful in getting the £3.2 million government grant. I know we've all been waiting really patiently to get it, so that's excellent news. We've got that, which will help us with our climate change and biodiversity work. So let's just get the budget approved and move on with it together. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Spot on, time-wise. Right. Councillor Jeffrey. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. The budget is different to the one I'd like to see. There is some good stuff in there, such as the 1,000 affordable homes, and well done for keeping that in there. But there's plenty that I disagree with. I did look at whether to propose a series of amendments, but the list got a little large, and of course my amendments will probably not land well with many of you. So I did, I was told last year to take stuff to the PACs, which I did, and frankly I was a bit disappointed to see things like the refurbishment plans for toilets not included in the budget. I do need to say I am appalled at KCC's snap decision, and I think it will come back to haunt them. I did want to see more investment in the climate change team. Climate change looks like it's on steroids. Last year was the first one to exceed the safe-ish limit of 1.5. A few days ago, global temperatures were over 2 degrees above industrial levels, and now we hear the AMOC is about to stop, which would be disastrous. We do need to put money into thinking about how we adapt our way of living and our town and our borough to cope with these very large changes. I was sad to see that by not increasing them in line with inflation. Town centre parking gets a further subsidy at the expense of other council services. And I was sad to see that the pay settlement doesn't meet the needs of everybody in terms of the real living wage, and I'd like to see that reversing. I did want to see more investment in the waste crime team. I think I was shouted down for proposing exactly that last time, and yet recently we found that Maidstone's got the highest level of fly tipping in the county for the past 3 years, and we haven't prosecuted anybody. We must be tougher on criminals. I'm not going to go on. I know this will go through, and I do hope the next administration will take a good hard look at the budget proposed and will be able to make changes so that they can deliver their programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So there's a little bit of criticism from Councillor Jeffrey for the decision not to add increased parking charges into the budget, and I completely understand that. If I were to see things from his point of view, as I try to do, it's completely justifiable that we should, of course, increase our parking charges so that nobody can use their car and doesn't come into our town centre. And indeed, if we have fewer people visiting our town centre, the shops which are already dwindling, let's face it, there will be fewer of them for us. We want a vibrant town centre, and that is why we were very keen not to increase parking. However, I think the important point here is that we do need to ensure that people, particularly from the rural communities, and indeed from not too far away afield from them, can jump on the bus and can get into town or use public transport. However, I'd look over at Councillor Mrs Jones, who is sort of shaking her head. Of course, I don't think it would be possible to conveniently come into town from Bredhurst on the bus or from large swathes of our borough. And we need to improve that. But I don't think we should be holding motorists to ransom for a result of the lack of bus services. We should encourage as many people as we can into town, and we shouldn't treat our car parks as a golden goose to top up the council's finances, and that is why I am delighted that we are keeping them as they are, to encourage as many people to come and spend time, money and enjoy our town centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I can't see anybody else. Yeah. Councillor Burton, could you sum up, please?
Be delighted to, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's a moving feast. We can always do better. We should never stop trying to do better. But I've picked up on a few things. It's very clear where one party sit on a Leeds-Langley scenario. People of Maidstone need to know that. Whether we like it or not, more housing will come down the line. And even if we dump it all into places like Marden, it still won't be enough. So it's right, I think, that this council puts serious research into what is possible, and I'd strongly support that £1 million in the budget to do that. The people of Maidstone want something done there. UK Prosperity Fund, the rural bit, and so on. Look, that's us passing money on from government. We had 2 pots of it. We widely debated around this council, how we do it. The plans were supported. So don't think that you can suddenly unravel that and dish out a bit to the middle, because there is no more money in that pot. You know, let's get real. The leisure centre, it is in the capital budget. All we've got to do now is figure out how to pay for it. And that's no mean task. So please, please keep a really close eye on that. Waste. Yeah, I've seen on your website and your headlines and your drives, but you actually look at this administration that has put up the fines, this administration that has exercised those fines, the number of fines, the fixed penalty fine, it comes before prosecution and it is effective. Prosecution is not the only measure, and I think you drastically misrepresent it. But anyway, in summary, this budget delivers, and I again commend it all to you.
Thank you. Well, can we now go to the vote, please? And it's named as well.
So, members, as the Mayor explained at the start of this item, it's a requirement that we take a named vote. So I'll be asking you whether you're voting for the budget on the papers or against, or you're abstaining. So if I can start then, please, with Councillor Blackmore. For. Councillor Bryant. For. Councillor Burton. For. Councillor Cannon.
For.
Councillor Cleater.
Abstain.
Councillor Coates. Councillor Conyard. Councillor Cook.
For.
And Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Cox.
For.
Councillor Eagle.
For.
Councillor English.
For.
Councillor Forecast.
For.
Councillor Fort.
For.
Councillor Garton.
For.
Councillor Gooch.
For.
Councillor Grigg.
For.
Councillor Harper. Councillor Harwood.
Against.
Councillor Hasty.
For.
Councillor Hinder.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Joy.
For.
Councillor Cadker.
For.
Councillor Natchball.
For.
Councillor McKenna.
For.
Councillor Mumford.
For.
Councillor Nagy.
For.
Councillor Newton.
For.
Councillor Parfitt-Reed.
For.
Councillor Perry.
For.
Councillor Reid.
For.
Councillor Riordan.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
For.
Councillor Rose. Councillor Round.
For.
Councillor Russell.
For.
Councillor J. Sams.
For.
Councillor T. Sams. Councillor Spooner.
For.
Councillor M. Thompson.
For.
Councillor S. Thompson.
For.
Councillor Trabinsky.
For.
Councillor Webb.
For.
Councillor D. Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor J. Wilkinson. Thank you.
Oh, he's here. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had your name crossed out. I'm so sorry. Four. Okay. So I think we probably were following that as we're going along. So the voting was 44 members in favour, 2 against and 2 abstentions, and so the budget is carried. Thank you.
Call upon the Leader of the Council to move that this report be noted.
I so move, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, seconded. Thank you. Looks as if anybody else wishes to speak. No. Is it agreed? Oh, yep, good. Right. What we are now 18. I call on the Director of Strategy, Insight and Governance to submit the report to the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I commend the report to Council.
Do I have a seconder? Oh, Oh, right. Is that agreed? No. Well done. Yep, well done. He is. Is there a seconder there? Cap Clive, thank you. Is it agreed?
Agreed.
Right. 19 now, okay. Oh, we're nearly there. 19. In accordance with the agreed protocol on Mayor and Deputy Mayor pre-selection, other than in exceptional circumstances, the Mayor should first have held the post of Deputy Mayor. In the year preceding the mayoral election, the Deputy Mayor is Councillor Martin Cox. Councillor Joy.
Martin, I can just about see you up there. Again, many thanks for this opportunity to propose you this evening as Mayor-Select. Stepping into the role of Deputy Mayor has given you a taster of what's to come, not only for you, but for your partner, Leonie, and the children, Amelia and Benjamin, who I know are so proud of you. Living in the local area, being community-minded, have enabled you to meet and work with many different organisations, which will put you in great stead for your role next year. Martin joined the council in 2011 and over the years has demonstrated his commitment to his constituents, us council members and the staff through his strong work ethic. Martin is a thoroughly likeable chap. I'm looking around to see if anyone disagrees, but he is. I don't think anyone can disagree, which I know is the sentiment from us all. Given the opportunity to the role of mayor, will fulfil an ambition to follow in the family footsteps. When you work hard, dreams can come true. Spending time with Martin is never boring, as you will know if you are with him socially, as we were, Annabelle, not long ago at the Mayor's Quiz, at a meeting or at a training. Tuesday evening, I shared with a very few councillors, I'm afraid, I think it was 5, was it 5? Thank you, that met here at the Town Hall for the briefing session on the Nolan Principles. And this was sort of still on my mind when I was thinking about what I was going to say tonight. For those of you that weren't there, I'm just going to take this moment to mention the 7 principles that I'm sure is on the tip of everybody's tongue. Selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, and leadership. And I think all these attributes there, Martin, adheres to you, and I know that you respect them all. Using these skills, we and the county town of Kent are in for a fun year, I'm sure. However, Martin, I did write down here, I am expecting just a little of the unexpected. So it is with great pleasure that I propose that Councillor Martin Ashley Richard Cox be appointed as Mayor-Select for the municipal year 24-25. Good luck. Thank you.
Are there any other nominations? Oh, sorry. Oh, crikey, yes, so I do. Right, who's Councillor Blackmore. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a big privilege, actually, to be able to second young Martin to be Mayor for next year. I know you like to be called young, although it's quite interesting because I was the last-minute addition to the quiz team a few weeks ago, called On the Day. I'm not quite sure who Chris and I were replacing, but it was a privilege, and we did have a lot of fun, Denise. Martin turned up with a wealth of food in a trolley. I don't know how many he was feeding, probably the whole room. But we did have a good laugh that evening. But what it did enable us to do is to have an insight into A, his cousin, and B, a really good friend of his as well. And I always think it's a sign of the person when you meet the company that they keep. Now, it's fair to say that these two young gentlemen provided me with some stories, which I can't regale you with at the moment, but I'll save it all for May. But nevertheless, I think be worried, be suitably worried. Be suitably worried. But what I would say to you is, I know you've only had the opportunity to use the mayoral car this year. And yes, once, I know it's not very good. But hopefully next year that will change and you might be able to sit in it a few more times. Fingers crossed, if it doesn't break down, which it shouldn't do. I think it's fair to say you're a truly likeable chap, quite a cheeky chappy. But when you become mayor next year, there will be situations, Councillor Cox, where you will have to develop your poker face. You can't sit there gurning at everyone because everything is funny. You will have to be sensible at times. But I think it's fair to say that you have got a little bit of Rowan Atkinson, if you don't mind me saying, about you. And we all know he can be serious as well as silly. So the Conservative group wish you the best of luck. And we're all right behind you. And we promise not to make you laugh when you're sitting in the big chair. So the very best of luck. And it gives me great pleasure to second the motion by Councillor Mrs Joy and support you, Martin Ashley, Richard Cox, as the Mayor-Select for 24-25. We're all looking forward to it. Lots of love and luck to you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackwell. Now, Councillor Cynthia Robertson.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. It gives me great pleasure to support the motion that Denise and Annabelle have just been speaking about, because I think, as most people know, there's a great tradition of public service in the Cox family. In fact, you only have to look at the boards to see that Martin's grandfather, Percy Barden, was a former mayor. His uncle, Peter Robinson, was a former mayor. And his father was actually a former councillor on this borough. So you've had a year's apprenticeship as deputy, so you're beginning to know the ropes, and I am sure that you will grow into the role and enjoy it. So good luck with it. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Jeffrey.
I wasn't expecting to say anything, but hey, hub. No, I'm very much happy to support the nomination, and yes, there'll be a lot of laughter coming out of that chair and mayoral car. So enjoy your time.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor Cleater, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On behalf of my group, I'm happy to support the nomination. You get to ride in the fancy car next year, so enjoy it. Or Stuart can lend you his bicycle if you really want to be green and go that way. But seriously, we wish you well. Enjoy your time. I mean, obviously, we all might not be here next year, but, you know, let's forget that. No, we wish you well and really pleased to support your nomination as mayor. And I look forward to all the exercise videos you're doing to be holding that regalia round your neck.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. Councillor Harper.
I'm happy on behalf of Patrick and myself to support Martin to be our mayor next year. Martin's a tireless worker, both in his voluntary work as well as a councillor. And he's had the privilege not only to be our deputy leader and our leader for a period of time, but also deputy mayor. So the next step up has to be being mayor. So you're well suited to the role, and I'm sure you'll thoroughly enjoy it when you get there.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Are there any other nominations? No. Sorry? Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this doesn't normally happen, but seeing as it's an all-up election, I have my fingers, my toes and everything else crossed. I've just got to inform about 1,000 other people to try and actually get elected in a different ward, etc., etc. It has been enjoyable being Deputy Mayor to Gordon. I hope the rest of his year goes well. But if you know anybody in the Grove Green and Vinters Park area, thank you.
Yes, is the motion agreed? Right. In accordance with the agreed protocol, the appointment of Deputy Mayor Select. In accordance with the agreed protocol on Mayor and Deputy Mayor pre-selection, the most senior member of the Council is set out in order of seniority by length of service of members who have not previously held the office of Mayor, who wish to take up that office and who have served for a minimum period of 6 years should be appointed to the position of Deputy Mayor. That person is Councillor John Perry. Okay. Oh, yeah, there he is. Now I'm looking to Councillor Burton to move. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fellow councillors, I'm delighted to be able to recommend Councillor Perry to you. There's an awful lot more to this man than meets the eye. Perhaps we should save a lot of it for later, but you know, he's been one of the most active participants in this council. He's chaired Planning Committee, he's chaired Democracy Committee, he's led this group. He's something of an aviation expert. He's a co-author to a book on the subject. He's very proudly the representative of the Republic of Staplehurst, and I'm sure you will have all heard him speak in such terms. We come to understand, of course, that is the centre of the universe, certainly the centre of Maidstone, and I'm sure it will be in a mayoral year when it comes forwards. A diplomat, a father, a husband. Jan, your wife, I think she will make an excellent escort to you and will attempt to keep you in good form. More recently, you've become a champion of the number 5 bus, and I think Jan has kept good track on you, but knowing where that bus starts and finishes. I fear that her grip may slip away as they eventually give you a mayoral car. Goodness knows where you'll get to. But look, a man of many talents, an accountant, an ambassador. I think you exhibit all of the skills that in time, to begin with, a deputy mayor, but in time a mayor will require. Really, really pleased to recommend you. One of your other skills that perhaps not many realise, and there's a little story that goes with this. As a accomplished driver of, and I hope I get this right, 4-in-hand horse carriage thing, did you know that? So he'll be quite happy driving his own coach and horses down the high street, probably at greater speed than we're familiar with. But I think he was walking a course on one occasion. Heard around the corner lots of language, shall we say, and as he approached, the gentleman discovered it was the Duke of Edinburgh. But not phased. John is absolutely able to speak to royalty. He's able to speak to us. He's able to empathise with our residents from all walks of life. These are just some of the skills and attributes that he will bring to the role. I wholeheartedly recommend him to you, and I move that Councillor John Anthony Perry be appointed as Deputy Mayor Select for the municipal year 2024-25.
Councillor English, second.
I've known John for, well, I won't mention how many years. It's quite a long time, isn't it? And I have to say that it is a pleasure to second him this evening to be nominated for Deputy Mayor in the coming year. I think it's true to say there are very few roles on this council that John hasn't done. He's been there, done that, and turned over the stone to find the loose change underneath. He's performed admirably in every single one of those roles that he's performed. I haven't always agreed with him. We've had some stand-up rows now and again on various things. But I've always found John to be a man of integrity and a man of reason. And if you can put an argument to him, he's willing to accept the argument. And that ability to listen to people, to understand where they're coming from, to be sympathetic, even with those people you don't agree with, is a real asset as mayor. His ability to, and when he gets the training session as deputy mayor, he will obviously be able to knock off any of the remaining rough edges, not that he's got that many rough edges. John has also been a pillar of the parish council movement in Maidstone, and one of the features we share is our aspirations that parish councils and parish government in Maidstone will be the best it can possibly be. And I look forward to the new model Staplehurst and Marden Unitary Authority as the new model of parish governance going forward. And in all seriousness, that knowledge of the parish councils in Maidstone and every part of the borough, urban and rural, will again stand you in good stead for the work to come. I must warn you, however, I've been doing some assiduous research on some of the, shall we say, more interesting stories about your past, John, but it would be probably unwise to ruin the surprise by unveiling them this evening. So I'll leave you a sense of anticipation, marginal apprehension about what I might be saying there. Now, all seriousness, I really do hope that you enjoy the deputy mayoral year to come and the mayoral year that will hopefully follow after that, because you will be a real asset to the borough of Maidstone and to its people, as you have been in all the roles you have fulfilled over a number of years I'd rather not remember. So I am happy on behalf of my group to second the nomination of John Anthony Perry for Deputy Mayor for the municipal year 24-25.
Can we call Councillors Mrs Gooch, Councillor Jeffrey, Councillor Cleater and Councillor Harper to support a motion?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, John, your time's coming, isn't it? It's really exciting. I really firmly support the nomination for you to be Deputy Mayor next year. It seems odd to see you in an apprenticeship kind of role, because I think you've always been at the top there, leading, in charge at that kind of level. And to be an apprentice, that I must say. I'm sure that you and Martin will make a great pair together between you. I know that you'll enjoy it. I wish you every success as deputy, and I fully support the nomination. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My fingers are too...
Councillor Jeffrey.
I'm also very happy to support the nomination. I've known John now for a couple of years and really found him to be a real gentleman, and I heard the word integrity earlier, and absolutely, definitely applies to you. And you've always been full of very considered words. So I do very much respect your rights and hope that you enjoy your time as Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Cleater.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, John, you finally managed to get hold of me by email today, but I am absolutely delighted to support your nomination on behalf of the Labour group. As new members, 3 of us, we've worked with you collegiately. We've learnt a lot from you regarding planning. It's right, you are a true gentleman and a man of integrity. And from a Scouser, a red Scouser, saying that to a member of your party takes some doing, but you deserve every accolade. So happy to support.
Thank you. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've known and worked with John since 2014 when we were both elected to the council. And what a great vintage 2014 that has been. John has been very easy to work with and is really an engaging person ever since I remember us going to our members' training meetings back in Maidstone House all those 10 years ago. He's an incredibly hard worker. He works really hard for Staplehurst, and I remember when we were looking into the sports provision for the borough, he said, Paul, you've got to come down to Staplehurst to look at what we can do down there. And he took me around the whole of the village, showing me all the various things to do. He's really passionate on his community and the wider community of Maidstone. So he's obviously going to bring all his energy and that enthusiasm to being our Deputy Mayor, and then subsequently, the year after, hopefully, being our Mayor. So I have no hesitation on behalf of Patrick and myself to support John to be Deputy Mayor. And just one last word of warning, beware, 2014 was when I came on the council, so you don't know what might happen in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Are there any other nominations? No. Is the motion agreed? I declare the meeting closed.